you stop running, you're in the present moment. You're here at last. So, there was this wonderful story about a novice in our monastery in Thailand many years ago in the time of Ajahn Chah. It's a beautiful story which shows you how easy it is to get into deep meditation, almost enlightened. This little novice was sitting down like you are on the hard concrete, on a marble. Wouldn't it be nice if they built these meditations halls with about, just on the floor, instead of marble, about 6 inches of foam, so you could sit down really nice. But it's always hard. Now this is okay here in this temple. That floor is flat. In the monasteries in Thailand, it was the villagers who laid the concrete, and they could not keep that concrete flat. It was bumpy. So as a young monks, you had to sit on the bumpy concrete. And after a while it got not just hard but sore. You didn't have any cushions. I started to complain. Said, look, it's the senior monks who've got all the cushions. And they don't need the cushions. They're so fat, they've got natural upholstery. And we young monks are so thin and bony. But anyhow, there was one talk late at night, and when Ajahn Chah started giving a talk, there was no time limit. He just went on and on and on. Sometimes he'd start at 9 o'clock and he wouldn't finish till 4 o'clock in the morning. So he couldn't sleep. And it was one of those evenings. Ajahn Chah was talking. Now, many of you may have read some of Ajahn Chah's books. One thing I will tell you is that when you read his books, that has been filtered. That's the cream of all those wise things he said. When I was there, you had to wait for hours to get one of those beautiful pearls of wisdom. And the rest of it was, quite frankly, rubbish. Talking about this, talking about that, other things. But it was worth it, because every now and again you got this beautiful, deep wisdom. And of course, now when we have these books by Ajahn Chah, they filter it all out, they just take the cream. But that's not what Ajahn Chah was like. Sometimes it was so boring. And I was interested. I was a monk. I was a Buddhist. But imagine some of these small little novices, 8, 9 years of age, 12 years maybe, and they were getting so tired and so bored, and they had to sit up. Oh, why am I having to do this? Why won't Ajahn Chah stop? And this one little novice, that's what he kept on thinking. When is he going to stop? When is he going to stop? When is he going to stop? And he kept thinking like this, again and again and again. Then he had what we call an insight. Real insights, you know them by their effect. Something breaks and you go into deep states of stillness and peace. That's the sign of an insight. He was sitting there, when's he going to stop? I'm tired, I'm sore. And the insight was, not when Ajahn Chah is going to stop. When am I going to stop? Thought the novice. He told us this afterwards. That's what he thought. He changed his thought from when is Ajahn Chah going to stop to when am I going to stop? And he stopped. A few hours later, he opened his eyes. Everyone was gone. It was early in the morning. He'd been sitting there for I don't know how many hours. So still, so mindful, so happy. He blissed out. He had stopped. That's called letting go. Stopping. So where do you stop? You stop in the present moment. You're not going anywhere. You're not chasing the Buddha. Number 2, you're not thinking. That's the second stage of letting go. All this commentary inside of you. Now, always describing everything you experience. Giving it a name. My goodness, people even give their cars a name. Sometimes you get these yachts. People give it names. We give everything a name. This is a car, it's not a person. Even you, even this, Ajahn Brahm, It's not a person, it's just a bunch of 5 khandhas, that's all. We tend to give everything a name. It's called thinking. Now, when we stop, the next stage after present moment awareness is silence. Shh. Nothing moves. The mind stops explaining things. You should be like a scientist. Gather the data rather than writing down your conclusions before the experiment is finished. You see already that people are writing things down. Why do you write things down? Don't say anything. Don't make a commentary. Allow it to be still. Listen, the last retreat I gave was last month in Perth. One of the meditators there, she was from Melbourne. She was a Sri Lankan girl. She told me she'd been meditating since she was a child, back in Sri Lanka somewhere. She managed to find a very good teacher, someone I never knew about, because this teacher told her how to get still. And she used that stillness when she was going to university in Melbourne. She said she didn't go to any tutorials, just went to the lectures. She didn't need to go to the tutorials. She got top marks every year in her university, the top. She said that when the lecturer was speaking, she just made her mind very still. Present moment awareness and silence. She didn't think. She soaked it all in. If you're thinking, you're not listening. Because if you're thinking, you're listening to your thoughts, not what the lecturer is saying. There's a great difference there. If you're thinking, you're not listening to Dhamma, the experience of life. You're listening to what you think about life. You're listening to delusion. If you're thinking, you can't see Dhamma. Dhamma can only be seen, experienced in the silence. So she was so silent, she could listen to her lecturer. She soaked it all in. When it came to the examination time, or time to do an assignment, she said the first thing which came into her mind, her teacher said, write that down straight away. She said it was always right. She didn't need to push her mind. Oh, what's the answer? Think. They always got the wrong answer. That's why she was successful at university. Brilliant, they thought, just because she knew how to listen. And she knew how to perform from silence. Now, do you understand why we can teach the Dhamma, but no one understands? Because very few people know how to listen. Make the mind still, silent. And everything you listen to, you'll be able to recall. Last week, before I came here, we had a visiting Thai monk, a great monk, Ajahn Brahm, from the north of Thailand. He's very, very well known, very famous, great powers. He came to visit my monastery for 1 week. When we had a question and answer session or a talk, I had to do the translating from Thai into English. And sometimes when you do a translated talk, sometimes these monks can't help themselves. They start talking for about 10 or 15 minutes, and they turn to say, translate it. If you have one sentence, it's easy. But 10 or 15 minutes, you've got this huge amount of information you've got to store in your brain, and then record it. Even though you know how busy I am, talking to people all day, and in the evening I had to do the translating. The other monks with me were very impressed, because when he finished 10 or 15 minutes, I translated it into English, all in line what he had said. So how do you do that, Ajahn Brahm? It's easy. When he was speaking, I listened. I never tried to remember. If you try to remember, you'll mess it up. Absolutely still, very, very soft, not trying, not being afraid, not trying to remember, not taking notes in your mind. Be very peaceful. When it all goes in, then it's like you press the rewind button. Then you start from the very beginning. You don't think about what's going to come next. It just flows naturally. It's great when that happens. You know how to listen, how to remember, how to recall. Silence is golden, not just because it's happy. It gives you a lot of power. So, in this meditation, that's the next level to get rid of. Thinking, naming, giving it all words. As you let go, you get into silence. The mind is not moving anymore. First of all, time stops, and then the mind stops, no thinking. The next level is you let go of diversity. At least getting into present moment awareness and silence is actually very, very profound. But usually we now, at this stage, take up a meditation object. The breath, the body, whatever it is, loving kindness. The point is you take up one concept rather than many. So the mind is not thinking of many, is not aware of many things, it just takes one thing. When it just takes one thing, because you're in the present moment, because you're silent, there's very little to disturb the object of your meditation. What happens is you start focusing even more in. You take up one thing, and then you go to that one thing within that one thing. You're starting this whole process of going deeper in to your body and mind. The breath, as it were, is in the center of the body. It's like central to your life. When you start watching the breath, you might start watching in, breath, out, breath in, breath out, breath. Now listen, it does not matter where you watch the breath. Tip of the nose, belly, who cares? This is from my own experience. I started meditation. I was taught, watch the tip of your nose. I suffer from hay fever. So sometimes my nose was so blocked up, I said, I can't see any breath. I keep on watching. Why I couldn't see it? Because it wasn't there. There was no breath coming in and out. No wonder I couldn't see it. So next of all I said, watch the belly. So I could watch the belly at first, but when I became a monk, that was not the right place to watch. If you watch the belly late in the afternoon on this retreat, it's so close to the stomach you start to feel hungry. And sometimes the breath wasn't there either. And I realized afterwards the Buddha actually said to watch the breath, not the belly, not the nose, watch the breath. Imagine that you were employed by the police. And the police told you that Ajahn Brahm, he's come from Australia. We don't know about these Australians these days. Maybe he's a terrorist. Look, he's got robes on. Who knows what? He's getting fat. Is that really fat, or is that sort of a suicide belt under there? So they say, watch this guy. So you're supposed to watch Ajahn Brahm. How do you watch Ajahn Brahm? You just watch him in the monastery. Sometimes I'm not in the monastery in Serpentine. Sometimes I'm here in Cittapalo. So if they're watching me at the monastery, they'll never find me. Why? Because I'm here. If they watch me here next week when I'm in Penang, they'll never see me. If you're going to follow a suspect, if you're going to watch them, you got wherever that suspect goes, that's where you go. They go in the toilet, you go in the toilet. They go in the bank, you go in the bank. If they go into the bedroom, you have to go to the bedroom. Wherever the person or the thing goes, you have to go along. So that's the same with the breath. If you're watching the breath, wherever the breath is, that's where you watch. It's obvious when I explain it that way. But first I thought you've got to watch it at one place. Well, the breath is supposed to be here. Or the breath is supposed to be there. I looked there and I couldn't find it. Why? Because it wasn't there. It was somewhere else. People lose lose awareness of the breath for that reason. They're watching it the wrong place. So I developed this little technique. I asked myself, am I breathing in or am I breathing out? If I could ask that question, I knew I wasn't dead, so I had to be breathing in or breathing out. It had to be one of the two. There's no other option. If I was dead, I would not be able to ask that question. So it was going in or it was going out, one of the two, how do I know? And I could always tell where the breath was going in, I could always tell where the breath was going out. And it was that sensation, that feeling, that experience. That's what I watched. It did not matter where that experience was located in the body. It did not matter how that experience manifested, whether it was pleasant or unpleasant, long or short, rough or smooth. That was not the point, as long as I knew the breath. And actually it became very helpful not to locate the breath anywhere on the body. It was as if I was disembodying the breath, watching the breath but not the body. That helped get deeper into meditation. Because once you've got the breath, you're supposed to let go of the body. People, when they're meditating, will notice. When you're meditating, your hands disappear, your legs disappear, your back disappears, your head disappears. Just like the bird on the tree. The tree disappears for the archer. Then the bird disappears and you're left with an eyeball. Or when you're watching the TV, the picture of your mother on top, the magazines underneath, the flowers to the side, they disappear. They're supposed to disappear. Then the wooden screen, the wooden boundary of the screen disappears. You just see the center of the screen. It's supposed to happen. The body is supposed to disappear. Fall off your screen as you focus just on the feeling of the breath. This is what we mean by the way of one-pointedness. Having oneness. As you go deeper and deeper and deeper, the breath starts to become fully occupying your mind. First of all, you might just know in, out, in, out, in, out. After a while, you know the whole breath from the very beginning to the end of each in-breath, of each out-breath. It's as if the breath fills every corner of your attention. You're fully aware of the breath. And something happens next, which I'll talk about probably this evening, of how, because the mind is being filled with one thing, because you're not doing anything, because there's no past, there's no thoughts, the mind starts to experience happiness. The mind becomes bright, becomes more mindful than you've ever been before. There are many levels of mindfulness. Ordinary mindfulness, powerful mindfulness, and what I call superpower mindfulness. I'll explain that later, but you start to experience superpower mindfulness now. This thing of the breath, you can really see it fully. Amazing what you can see. It's always been there, but you're not mindful enough to see the whole thing. And it grows naturally. And with that mindfulness, with that power, comes great energy and joy and happiness. It's why I call this stage the beautiful breath. You're sitting there, focusing in on the breath. Oh my goodness, it's amazing, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. You're just so happy sitting here watching this delightful, delicious breath. It's just like you've got this amazing meal in front of you. Oh, every taste, every mouthful is absolutely more delicious than you've ever had before. This is nice. Now this is where the meditation really starts to get fun. This is when people start to get these stages. I start to get happy. You're starting to know what meditation is. Once you start getting to these happy states, then you're on the edge of great things. Not only is the mind powerful, it's happy. And because it's happy, it just loves investigating, investing, going in. Now, invest is actually clothing yourself, getting in to those clothes, getting inside. This is what happens when we go in. We go into that beauty. The whole body, you'll find, has disappeared. Time has disappeared. You haven't got a clue what people are doing around you. You don't care. It's just so wonderful. You go in to that beauty. Now that time, these wonderful, amazing lights appear in the mind. When those happen, you're very mindful, very blissed out. and you don't know what's going on around. And this is getting deep. When these things